That falls apart so fast when your self-care turns into the detriment of others, right? But it turns into selfishness. We're both redefining words. You just don't get mine. I don't think that old man is happy. I'm pretty sure he's not like, yeah, I feel satisfied in myself. Like, there's no way. Like, you know what I mean?
We would be much happier if you'd get off our lawns. I mean, that is absolutely asinine crazy to me.
It's pretty wild. Yeah,
that is absolutely nuts to me.
Hey, everyone. Welcome back once again to the Sundays and Side Quests podcast. I'm your host this week, Logan.
I'm your co-host, Keith.
Today, this is our family week. We're talking about intergenerational differences in communication. I know that, Dad, you are a part of the Generation X, in between baby boomers and Generation Z. I almost forgot the name. You guys were so forgettable as a group of people. And of course, I'm part of...
We're the forgotten generation.
Yes. And I'm a Generation Z. We are the perfect mix of Generation X. We're really the cream of the crop that came out. So today we're going to look at how not to end up like an old man on your lawn yelling at teenagers to get off your property.
Get off my lawn!
Yeah, really. Literally, I can picture his dentures falling out onto the porch as he yells that. But no, we're going to look at it. This is a debate that, and not so much a debate, but a comparison that's been made like constantly. This is always something that we talk about. This is a big thing as far as how humans communicate and how we interact with each other. The differences between generations, especially as of late, has gotten seemingly so massive. Like, it feels huge.
You know, and I wonder how much of that is it actually different? Or how much of that is every generation feels that, does I'm Gen X, you're Gen Z. My dad was a baby boomer, and I don't know, with the silent generation before him or something like that.
Yeah.
Did they feel exactly the same way that we feel? Did my grandfather think my father was just as goofy and weird and disconnected from reality as I sometimes feel about you?
I'm gonna say no, because I'm a pretty. If the bar graph is kind of here, I'm an outlier over here, Yeah,
you are a little bit different than a lot of your peers, that's for sure.
But potentially as a whole, I'm sure there's some truth in that. Why is Generation X called like the latchkey generation? Like, what does that mean?
So Generation X I think it's defined as between 1965 and 1980, known as the latchkey generation because we grew up, a lot of families were divorced. There was a lot more the mom working outside of the home. We were the first generation that kind of had to take care of ourselves. So I didn't get rides to and from school. You either rode the bus or you rode your bike or you walked. And when you got home, nobody was home. So you would get home and you had a key. You had a key to your house, and so you would come in and unlock the door, and then you would make yourself a snack. And we're talking from like 7, 8 years old. You were by yourself because mom and dad were both at work, and they oftentimes didn't get home until hours after you did. So that's why they call us the latchkey. Your generation, what the Gen Z is, the 1997 to 2012. So we're skipping the millennials. We're not talking about the millennials. They're kind of in between us.
Yeah, I don't think anyone wants to talk about the millennials anymore.
Right. We've talked about them enough. But you guys are known as the digital natives, or Zoomers, I guess.
Yeah, Zoomers. Boomers and Zoomers.
Boomers and Zoomers.
And you guys are the one that don't get a nickname because nobody remembers you.
You know what? And quite frankly, most of us Gen Xers are perfectly fine being forgotten.
Yeah.
We just want to be left
eating
alone.
Popcorn on the bleachers while the other two duke it out.
Yeah. We're used to doing things ourselves. We don't need your approval. We don't need your help. So this is kind of the conversation is what makes us different and what are some of the key differences? I mean, I grew up before the digital revolution. We didn't have cell phones.
Right.
I remember when I was a teenager, that was when we first had pagers. Do you even know what a pager is?
I'm aware of the concept. It was like a smartphone, but with no touch screen.
Not at all. No.
Yes, I know what a pager is. It's a much more simplified form of communication where you could basically just send a notification that said, hey, you're needed here, or this person is trying to contact you.
So yeah, when it first started out, they were just called beepers, and all it would do is it was just something you would wear on your belt. They would call from their phone, and all you could really do is you could leave a numeric message. And so what you would normally do is you would punch in your phone number, which is basically, hey dude, give me a call whenever you can. Right. Later on we started using, like, you could punch in, you would put in, 07734. Do you have any idea what that means?
Is that I have no idea. Hello, maybe?
If you look at that and you flip it upside down, it says hello.
See, for my generation, it was putting like 80085 on the calculator and then being like, look, it says boobs.
Oh, boobs. It took me a minute. I was like, that doesn't say hello.
That doesn't say anything.
Right. So we didn't have cell phones, and when cell phones first came out, they started out as these big brick things, and then even when it became the flip phones, it was still, that was something you used to call people. There was no texting, there was no internet access, you weren't checking your email. I mean, later on with people with Blackberries and stuff like that. So we were a part of that generation that saw that come into fruition. But like, do you even remember a time where smartphones weren't a thing, where phones didn't have screens?
The earliest memory I have is like seeing the other kids at school that had smartphones and wishing I had one. Like that's always been the case. It was like the oldest we got was like iPods, right? The
scrolling. Yeah. Okay. All right, so let's talk about some of the differences here. I went on and I did some research on that interwebs of yours. It says, okay, what are some of the key differences between generations? Technology. Gen X grew up during the rise of the internet, while Gen Z has only known a fully digital connected world.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, can you imagine a world without the internet?
Now, no, I can't, because it will never be that way anymore. Ever.
Right. Yeah. It'll never happen again. I remember when I was growing up, in order to get on the internet, you had to go and dial in, and you had that weird sound, like you would call up. You had your computer was hooked up through a phone line.
Yeah, that's crazy work.
You would call up AOL or whatever, and you would hear that weird while it connected and everything. And then you would wait for it to, then you'd have to go and say, I'd like to go check my email. And, oh yeah, it was horrible. All right. Other differences: workplace mentality. Gen X is often viewed as self-reliant, practical, and adaptable. Gen Z, in contrast, prioritizes mental health, purpose over presence, and often questions rather than accepts traditional workplace structures.
Yeah, Generation Z is a massive proponent and voice for, like, just use example, like office spaces. There are sort of like traditions and things that have been set in place over years about stuff like, I don't understand the idea of that it's against workplace etiquette to discuss your salaries with your coworkers. Like,
okay.
Like, yeah, to me,
that was taboo.
To me, that is an arbitrary rule that upper management has pushed so that he can pay you something different than me, and we're not allowed to talk about it, so we never fight back, right? Like, to me, that's what that is. It's like, if we have the same job, but it's so taboo to talk about salary, he can give us pay discrepancies, and we'll never know about it. Like, it's stuff like that. I think in newer companies, in younger companies, the structure for how employee-boss relationships and stuff work is so much different. And some ways it's good, and some ways it's bad, but it is definitely different.
See, to me, it was, you don't need to know what I make, and I don't need to know what you make, because we may be doing the same job, but I do it better than you, so I should be getting paid more than you.
Yeah, but you don't know that.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, it left room for employers to actually benefit the people that were more of a benefit to their company, instead of this whole, the way you're describing it. Well, we're going to unionize, and so that means that the guy that's, the salesman that's selling 40 units a week is going to make the same amount as the guy who sells 10 units a week and I just can't fire him because I need him right now. I would much rather pay the guy that only sells 10 units a week less, pay and benefit the guy who's selling 40 units a week, because if I give him a pay raise, he'll work harder. And why should I give you a pay raise? You see what I mean? It's that it's the meritocracy versus the socialism kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. And
that's why we didn't ask.
Well, and the difference is accountability, because any employer can justify, based on merit and experience, having a pay discrepancy versus someone else, even though they perform a similar function. Like right now, I just started my welding job. I'm a welder fabricator. I weld all the same things that the other welders do, but I'm sure they have a higher salary than me because they've been there longer. The only difference is, like, that's justified. The only difference is when it's taboo to talk about it, you leave the door wide open for malpractice to occur, right? For that under the table, we can get away with hiring you for less money than we could him because he negotiated better or something, right? Like something along those lines. If I'm a no experience welder, but I'm confident, I can be like, no, I want to start here. Like we can negotiate, right? Versus someone else that's maybe the same age with no experience. They're just happy to have a job. And so they'll get lowballed, and then we wouldn't be any of the wiser. And that happens, right?
Sure.
And that's just that's one of the examples that I from social media and even listening to students and podcasts and stuff that I listen to. All of them are generally young podcasts, young shows. And there's this phrase that Gen Z has. I don't know if you ever heard of this, but it's very simple and self-explanatory, but it means a lot more than it says. Generation Z often says, question tradition. You ever heard of that? You ever heard that phrase?
Sure. Yeah.
Kind of it's the general like label to this idea of when you are told to do something or see something, like critically think about what that thing is and where that came from. Question tradition, have a voice of yourself, and don't just like accept the things being thrust upon you.
Okay. But from a Gen X position, a tradition is simply something that it's worth doing again. And so it's things that we've figured out. And so at some point, it's fine to question tradition, but to reject all tradition just because it's tradition means that you're going to force yourself into a position where you have to go and do things in a stupid way because you just can't do it the traditional way because you're anti-traditional.
Yeah. There's definitely like refusing to. There's definitely and I would argue that that's a different kind of non-critical thinking, because if you were genuinely seeking the truth, you would investigate where the tradition or experience came from and the wisdom behind it.
Sure.
Versus someone who is just like, I'm going to figure it out myself because I hate my parents or something, right? Like
and I think that's the thing that I find the most is when you've got these young people that are just like, well, that's just the way you used to do it. And it's like, well, yeah, because that's the way that it works.
Have you ever seen the experiment with that cage full of monkeys at the zoo?
No.
They have. So imagine you put 10 monkeys in a cage, right? And it's got bars all around the cage so you can see into it. And in the middle of the cage, there's a step ladder that's maybe 10 feet high, and there's a pile of bananas on top, right? And I don't think they actually use bananas. This was a real experiment that was done. I don't think they actually use bananas, but they use like, desirable food for a monkey. That's just the toddler, like monkeys like bananas, whatever. But they had a treat at the top of the ladder hanging from the ceiling. And whenever a monkey would go to climb the ladder, they would take a high pressure hose and spray that monkey off the ladder, like get it off. And they would spray the entire cage. They would spray every monkey. So a second monkey would be like, oh, look, there's food up there, and start climbing the ladder. And they would spray every monkey. And then at a certain point in between each spray, they took 2 of the monkeys out and put 2 brand new monkeys in. When the 2 brand new monkeys came in, everyone got sprayed again. When the second brand new monkey went to climb the ladder, he got beat up by the other 8 because they knew what happens if a monkey tries to climb the ladder. You take 2 more out, put 2 more in, they try to climb it, the monkeys get beat up. Eventually, by the end of the experiment, all of the original monkeys that have ever been sprayed are out of the cage. And yet, any monkey that still tries to climb the ladder, and at this point, the scientists aren't spraying the monkeys anymore, so they can go up to have the food if they want. But anyone that tries to climb the ladder gets beat up by the other monkeys. and none of the monkeys have ever been sprayed or have seen the water, but they know for some reason that when you climb the ladder, bad things happen or something. And this experiment gets used a lot as like an allegory for societal mentality, where something occurs or something is a certain way in a situation, and so people teach their children, do this way and don't do this way. And then after so many generations of that, you have this idea where the situation that first generation was in, where it makes sense to do something a certain way, that situation doesn't exist anymore. And yet you're still taught that, like, well, why do we do it that way? It's the right thing to do. Right. And so it's like, and that's not a rule as a whole, but it's definitely an observable symptom. And so that's kind of the inspiration behind the whole question tradition movement that I think my generation is pushing. And I think the millennials did too, but the millennials were almost seemed just sort of spiteful. Like you were saying, they were so much the other way that they were just like, I'm not going to do anything my parents do, whatever, or my older generations have done, and they really screwed themselves over a little bit in that.
Yeah, I think at some point you can take it so far that you can't do things in a way that is beneficial because somebody before you did it.
Yeah, just because like, well, you have
I
to
just
be
have to do it different. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like that guy in the friend group that just doesn't like anything anyone else likes, like with movies and video games and stuff.
Yeah,
it's like,
you just got to be different.
Yeah, I didn't really like the original Star Wars movies, and you're just like, okay, come on, dude. You don't got to try that hard to be that different.
Yeah,
so annoying.
He's going to be contrarian no matter what.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So another difference, it says communication and culture. Gen Z is deeply influenced by digital platforms like TikTok, fostering a more globalized, multicultural outlook. When it comes to communication, I know I definitely have a problem with Gen Z communication. So, all right, from an old guy perspective, here's some of the things that drive me nuts. I cannot stand the fact that you cannot get, and so I'm gonna speak primarily about you and your sister.
Got it. The two Gen Z kids that you have, which is
that I have,
fair.
The commitment issues. It's the trying to get you guys to commit to something is, and I'll be honest, this is more your sister than it is you. It's like, okay, are you guys coming over for dinner on Saturday night or on Sunday night? Because we try to do family nights and Sunday nights, and it's like she'd be like, well, I don't know, yeah, I'll let you know. And it's like, well, okay, it's Wednesday. Are you coming over on Sunday or not? I need to know if I need to go to the store, because if I'm making dinner for 6 people, that's different than if I'm making dinner for 4 people. And you've known about this. Why can't you just commit to it? Well, I don't know what's going to be going on this weekend. Well, if you commit to this, you can put that on your calendar and you'll know something that's going on this weekend. Mm-hmm. To a Gen Xer, this whole idea of, I'm going to leave everything up in the air and I'm going to see what I feel like in the moment. That drives me crazy.
Now, do you think that that's a Gen Z thing specifically? Because I know that you've talked to me about the church struggling with that too. Like it's like pulling tooth and nail to get church members to commit to either attending or serving at functions in a similar way.
I don't know that it started with Gen Z. Perhaps it started with the millennials and carried over into the Gen Z. I do know that that's not the way my generation thinks.
Right.
We have calendars and we keep them. And if somebody says, hey, can you meet me at the softball field at, 4:00 on Thursday? Cool. And then the other thing that goes along with that is, if I commit to meet you at the softball field at 4:00 on Tuesday and something happens and I can't make it, I'm going to call you and I'm going to let you know that I can't make it.
Right.
Or and that's the other thing that drives me crazy. This whole, I think Gen Z has no problem canceling plans even after stuff has been made. I don't know how many times we've had Lila or even you say the day before or even a couple hours before, say, oh God, by the way, I'm not going to make it today. Why? Well, something else came up. And so that even when you do finally say that you'll come and do something, it's like, yeah, well, that's a soft commit. And it's almost like, until something else is better, or I'm always going to leave my option open. Mm-hmm. And that is just infuriating, because it's like, man, I've already made plans. I've already done this. And for some reason, for most Gen Zers, it's like they don't have a problem. They don't think that or I'll put it this way, they don't think that anyone should have a problem. It's like, I need to cancel my plans. So why are you mad at me? Or why is that a problem for you? That shouldn't be a problem. I get to do, I'm an adult. I get to make my own decisions. And to a Gen Xer, it's like, man, that's a total lack of courtesy. Or this no call, no show stuff. I'll be there 4:00 on Tuesday, and then I'm there at 4:00, and the person that said that they were going to meet me didn't show up, didn't call me to tell me, and won't answer my call when I call them, and don't respond to the text message I send them. And it's not until like a day or two later that's like, oh yeah, something came up, sorry. And that's supposed to be okay. To a Gen Xer, it's like, dude, you obviously don't want to be friends anymore.
Yeah, I actually greatly appreciate the Gen X and even Grandpa's generation, the core value of integrity that was taught to you guys, which is I have observed and experienced and loved about the close adult friends that I had at New Life, right? Which I'm trying to make more of here. But when I needed help, when I needed help moving, when I wanted them to come to a social gathering or something, and when they said they would be there, like they'd
be there.
Yeah. It's an unfortunate side effect of the question tradition thing, is that the focus on self-care got skewed so much to be so much so that, like, if you don't want to do something, just don't go, just don't do it. Like, take care of yourself.
And you don't owe anyone any explanation.
Right. And that falls apart so fast when your self-care turns into the detriment of others, right? When it turns into selfishness.
Right. Or just, and you're just being flat out rude to other people. You just, right. I mean, you just can't be relied on. You can't, I can't trust you, or I just don't believe anything that you say, because half the times when you say you'll do something, you don't, or you say you'll be here at this time and you don't show up and you don't bother telling me. And I think you're right. To me, as a Gen Xer, I absolutely see that as selfishness. It's like, you obviously didn't care enough about anybody but yourself, that you didn't care that I had to jump through hoops to make sure that I was here when I said I was going to be here. I've had people, I've had Gen Zers or millennials, say, hey, can you help me? I mean, I'm coming to help them. Right. It's not something that I need to do. I'm doing it for them. And then they end up canceling, or they end up no showing. And it's like, dude, do you not understand what I had to do to get here to help you? I don't need to be doing this.
Right.
And you're that to a Gen Xer, it's like, boy, then there's fighting words. If you're if you're going to pull that crap, we can't be friends.
I think that why we're observing such a massive gap is, if you look at the technological innovation curve of human society in the last 1,000 years, the last 50, even 20, has been exponentially shot up. Globally, lives, are completely different, especially for first world. Even just the way stupid stuff, like the way products are produced and the way information goes out and the way anything is processed anymore. Like, everything is so drastically different. And like you're saying, you have a generation where they're experiencing both, and a generation like mine that knows nothing but the latter.
Yeah. I remember what it was like to be by myself, and when I needed help, I needed that person to show up.
Yeah.
Because there was no other way to do it without help. And your generation has just grown up with, well, if I don't do it, it's okay. It doesn't need to get done.
How do you feel about Gen Z slang?
So here's my deal. Every generation has slang, right? And what we did, we Gen Xers, we took words and we redefined them in a way, so wicked became cool. That's totally wicked. That, that meant something. Or sweet, or sick. We would say, oh, that's so sick. Well, it doesn't mean that it's gross and sick. It means it's cool. And, but the Gen Z stuff, you guys haven't just made, a bunch of different words. My generation made a bunch of different words that meant cool.
Yeah.
Right. Your generation has made up your own words. Like, these aren't even words. Or you have taken a word and you've completely, like, it doesn't mean anything like what it used to mean.
I mean, arguably all words are made up, but
sure. But like, I mean, you texted me something the other day, and I'm like, I have no idea what that means.
Yeah.
And it was.
I said for the Gen Z listeners, I said it's giving. He said something that my grandpa would usually say, and I said it's giving grandpa, and he was like, "What? What's giving grandpa?"
Yeah, I'm like, and then you explained to me. I said, I don't know what that means. You said, well, what you just said is giving off like grandpa vibes. I was like, okay, if you would have said it's giving grandpa vibes, I would have understood that. But you just said it's giving grandpa. I'm like, it's giving grandpa what?
Yeah.
Or it's giving grandpa to who?
Katie and I thought that was very funny.
What's some other slang that maybe I wouldn't understand?
Yeah, I think everyone's heard all of the usual ones. Be careful not to ascribe stuff like 6'7" and Skibidi Toilet in Ohio as Gen Z. That's not Gen Z, that's Alpha. Get that out of here. Gen Z is fire, no cap, finna. Do you ever heard of finna?
Okay, so fire is another way of saying cool. Okay, yeah. I can understand that. We did that. Yep. No cap means nothing to me. I don't know what that means.
And no cap means that everything in the previous sentence or paragraph was true. No lie. So no cap.
How does cap mean lie though? Why not just say no lie? Because we used to say that. We'd be like, "Hey, no lie, man." But
because if you're not telling the truth, if you're not telling the truth, you're capping. And that's my explanation for that.
So that's what I'm saying. You just decided that capping means lying, and you don't want to use lying. You're saying capping, even though cap has nothing to do with lying.
You just admitted earlier that you decided wicked meant cool and sick meant cool. That's not what those words mean. No, you're doing the same thing.
But that's what I'm saying. We use it as a slang term for cool, just like you said. That's fire. That fire doesn't mean cool. Fire is quite literally the opposite of cool. But okay, but if I wanted to say, hey, put that down, I wouldn't just say put that Sasquatch, and I'm suddenly saying that Sasquatch means down now. What? Why? So for you to say no capping means no lying, it's like, why does cap suddenly mean lie? That makes no sense.
We're both redefining words. You just don't get mine.
All right, we're moving on. What was the other one you said?
I said you ever heard of finna?
Finna, no.
That means that you are, if you can probably get it from context if I use it in a sentence like I'm finna go make some pasta. That means like I'm fixing to. That's Southern context.
Well, you just okay. So you just commandeered fixing.
Yeah,
that's a Southern term.
Exactly.
I'm fixing to go make some pasta. But you didn't even shorten it.
Yeah, didn't even shorten it.
That's what I'm saying.
There's fam, there's bae.
Fam is family.
We're getting into like the beginning of Gen Z slang with those kinds of words.
Okay.
Like I thought you were bae. Turns out you're just fam. That's since it's a Gen Z episode, can I make that the pop culture reference of the day?
Okay,
even though you don't know where it comes from.
I don't like not knowing where they come from.
Yeah, it's bad.
Usually
it's hard
you're
for
the one that doesn't know.
I'm the host now, and I get to decide what it is. That's pop culture reference of the day. If you know where that comes from.
Okay, so does that come from like a movie or a song or something? It can't just come from your generation.
It comes from pop culture.
But something that's identifiable, so somebody can win one of our Nog mugs?
It's very identifiable, yeah.
Okay. All right.
I think slang is actually kind of, regardless of the funny aspect in it, I think slang is kind of a beautiful thing because language serves as a model for communication between human beings. And people don't realize that language has so much emotion tied to it. Like we're taught laws and rules and grammar and the definitions of words and all these things, which are valuable tools. But language is the way that we express love or passion or even hate and malice. And that's why the Bible puts so much emphasis on our controlling our tongues and our not being able to. And I think with the rise of like social media, this interconnected globe that you were just talking about, that slang or that adaptation of language to convey emotion in younger generations is now worldwide. I think that's elegant in its own way. I think that's special while it does come with its downfalls. Like I told you the other day, I said, slang is, especially like 6'7" as of recent, it's like the world's biggest, stupidest inside joke. You know what I mean? Because it doesn't make any, and that's what an inside joke is. There's no obvious punchline. It's one of those like, if you know kind of things. And when Six
Okay.
Seven was around, it was just a giant if you know, but nobody really knew.
Okay. So I'm going to disagree with you there. That's a Gen Zer defining what an inside joke is. What an inside joke to a Gen Xer is, we have me and this other person. Let's say there's this third person in the conversation. Let's say me, you, and Richard. Me and Richard have a previous experience where something happened that was funny. It was a true event. There was a reason why it happened. There was a reason why it was memorable to us, and the two of us can reference that funny experience, that funny shared thing, and you are simply on the outside of the joke because you weren't in on it, you weren't there, you don't know what we're talking about.
Right.
That's what an inside joke is. It's something that actually is truly funny and has source. The whole 6-7 thing, people have tried to explain to me where it comes from. It was never funny. It never had a reason.
Yeah,
It
where's
never
the
had
punchline?
That's what I'm saying. So it's not like it's an inside joke that people are on the outside of. Because the difference is, if Richard and I have an inside joke, we can tell you the story of what happened and we can pull you in. And suddenly now it can be an inside joke between the three of us because we can share that experience with you. And you could be like, oh my gosh, that's so funny. I wish I was there. And now the three of us can, and now when Lenny comes, now he's on the outside, but you're on the inside because you've been shared what that experience is. The whole 6-7 thing, there is nothing that's funny. It was never funny. It's not an inside joke. You're saying no, it's not, because even after you explain it, it's still stupid. It never made sense. It was never funny. And so that's where the people that are on the outside, they never get pulled into the inside because it never made any sense, even after you explain it.
Well, and I agree with you. It's stupid. And the inside, it's fundamentally different too, just like you were saying, because something happens which creates the inside joke, and that's what people reference, versus the culture we live in now is the inside joke and the thing that happened are not separate things. They are the thing. If you know what the joke is, that's the reference, right? You're not referencing something else it's dumb. Here's the beauty in it, though. And I think you've experienced this. From what I'm told, you and Mom used to be quite the pop culture fanatics, and you would giggle to each other, when you were like dating and first married, about stuff that Grandma and Grandpa had no idea what you were talking about and stuff.
Sure.
So you understand this feeling. The beauty in it is that I can interact with anyone from my age range or from my generation, and almost immediately connect a bridge with them because they know and were raised on the things that I know and was raised on. Yesterday I'm trying really hard to make friends in Utah, and I am an introvert generally.
Yeah.
When someone asks me to
be behind locked doors.
Yeah, exactly. In the church office, people used to call me Deadbolt because I told the story once that everyone was like, oh yeah, we would just leave the door unlocked, and if you wanted to come in, we would answer the door, and oh, look, company. Versus me, I'd be like, if someone knocks the door, I wouldn't answer at all. I would just turn the deadbolt.
Quietly engage the deadbolt.
But anyway, last night I went out with some friends to Salt Lake City to go to a Thai restaurant. They invited me out, and I didn't want to go, but I'm glad I went. It was super fun, and almost all the jokes we were cracking together, which we spun off and made our own, were originating from all of the memes and vines and references that we had been raised on. And it was so easy. We even talked about it. We were like, yeah, it feels like we've been friends for a lot longer than we have. And the beauty in that is because we have been experiencing the same things. So we have so much in common that we are a lot more connected. And I value that a lot. I mean, that's the reason why I worked so well with youth. And I'm sure I had that ability less and less as I removed myself further and further from the culture and from the internet.
Yeah, at some point you will become the guy that's yelling, right, "Get off my lawn."
But with youth, when a new student comes in and I can act and behave as in a similar manner to the people that they are already used to and comfortable with, that's an immediate connection. Is like, oh, this guy gets me. And it's not even something that they intentionally think about, but it's the emotional part of their brain that's just like, I can trust him. You know, I would like to continue to talk to him or continue to build a good rapport. And that's something that maybe you can speak to this. Do you think your generation has that, or has something similar to that, or has experienced something similar to that?
I think when I was your age, we probably didn't, because we didn't have memes. I mean,
Right.
we didn't have the internet, we didn't have TikTok, we didn't have, I mean, the funny videos that we saw were we would tune in to America's Funniest Home Videos on TV on Saturday nights, or so we didn't have that. I couldn't go up to a stranger and and have that shared experience, because we didn't have anything that was globally shared that way. That's why our inside jokes were inside between the people that we had a shared experience with. And then we would tell those stories, and then telling the stories was letting that person in on what that was. And then we had, oh, so even if you weren't there, you could be like, oh, hey, tell them that story you told me.
Yeah.
If we were sitting down to dinner with strangers or whatever, we couldn't just instantly make jokes that they would understand, because they didn't have the internet.
Right. They didn't know
You
the
know,
story. They weren't,
right.
you're starting from
But
ground zero.
in some ways, I think in some ways that's how we made the connection, is instead of us just spouting off memes and jokes that we had all already seen, we were sharing stories that would make each other laugh. And I mean, so we still had the same kind of interaction.
Mm-hmm.
And and your story would remind me of a story that I had that was similar to that but different. And so you would tell me your story, then I would tell you my story, and then that would remind you of this other story. And so it wasn't that we didn't already know the punchline to the joke. We were sharing new
Sure.
things.
Yeah, and the flip side to my point as well is that it's sort of like what you were saying, is that I think everyone should have to experience the uncomfortability and awkwardness of bridging a connection with a person that they had never met before.
Right.
And it's because we have an awesome thing where we can relate to people so quickly. It in turn, in a lot of situations, creates an opposite effect where if we can't relate with someone like that, then we just won't talk to them. It forms cliques, and it forms groups where if it's not easy to build a relationship with you, then I'm just not going to do it, because I can do it so much easier with someone else, which is a
Your
dangerous game.
I think your generation struggles so much more with anxiety than mine did.
Yeah, so you hear social anxiety a lot. That's
Yeah,
something that
I mean,
Lila struggles with, that that you know about.
and I want to make sure that I say this correctly. It's not that we didn't have anxiety. It's that your generation struggles with it so much more, because like you said, that if this is difficult, I'll just give up on it and I'll just never talk to you again. And that's an anxiety, where my generation was, I didn't necessarily have that option. And so the way for me to deal with my anxiety is I had to develop coping mechanisms
Right.
that helped me get over that I think a lot of the new generations just don't bother developing. We've seen this in our gaming stuff. Like when we play games with people, and I know you're not this way, but I know a lot of the young people are this way. If they can't win the game the first time they play it, they'll never play it again.
That's my brother-in-law. Shout out to him. One of the first jokes he ever made with us was, um, if I play a new game for the first time and I win it, then I'm not going to do it again because I
Yeah.
did it. I'm satisfied.
Right. Or if you're learning a new game and you don't win, it's like, well, that wasn't any fun. I'll never play that again.
Yeah.
It's like they never bothered to develop the coping mechanisms that say, okay, yeah, this is a brand new game and I'm playing somebody who's obviously played before. I should expect to lose.
Yeah.
But my generation is like, man, you kicked my butt. Let's go again.
Right.
Let's
Yeah,
go again.
that's that self-care element again too, where you're like, if I don't want to do it, people are much less willing to push past the bad or negative or worse experience to get to the prize. They're so much quicker to just give up and just stop because they don't like it.
So that brings me to some other research that I did. I found this, and I don't know if you'll agree with this or not, but it says that the games that we played, according this is a study done by psychologists. The games of the '90s rewired Gen X's brains differently than the games of today wire Gen Z or Gen Alpha's brains. Because basically the games of the 90s, they forced you to fail and retry. I remember growing up, the games that we played, Mario, Sonic, Aladdin, Prince of Persia. Basically, you started the game with 3 lives and you saw how far you could get. There was no saves, there was no hints, there was no cheat codes. Like in Mario, you had to develop extra lives in order to keep going. Or you play in your Aladdin game, and if you got to level 5 and it was, or level 3 or whatever, I can't remember which level it was, but it was the level where you had to escape the what was it, the place where he found the lamp in the initial place, and the lava was coming and you were flying on this magic carpet and everything. That was one of the hardest levels. You had 3 chances, and that's if you saved all 3 of your lives to get to that level. And when you died, you couldn't go play that level again. You couldn't auto save. You had to go all the way back to the beginning and play levels 1 through 3 again to get to level 4. Yeah. And so they said when you lost, you learned patience, you learned planning, and you learned frustration tolerance. They go on in this study to say today's games have step-by-step guides, maps, path arrows, and auto save every 10 seconds, removing the real challenge. Success is determined by the time you spend in the game rather than the skills you acquire. I remember Doom, Quake, Zelda. There was no maps. There were no path arrows. You had to wander around until you found this place, and you had to remember, oh, okay, when I come out of this cave, if I go to the right, then that's where I'm going to find this village or whatever. And I've explored all that, so now I'm going to go to the left.
If you can't figure something out, just look it up on YouTube, and there'll be 100 videos that walk you through it exactly.
No way. We never had that. we just had to go figure it out, right? But it says scientists now show that the old games strengthened the hippocampus, which apparently is the part of the brain for memory and navigation. Mm-hmm. No wonder Gen Z never know which way to go. Because if they don't have their GPS on their phone telling them, they need that step by step. Where I remember when we just had Thomas guides, I would look it up and I would look it up in a map before I'd get in the car, and then okay, I got to go figure it out. And if I made a wrong turn, I remember, okay, that's the wrong turn, so I'm going to go back to where I was, and I'm going to do it again. Like you said, there's a difference in mentality that leads to a much more highly anxious, because maybe your generation just hasn't been forced, even in the games that they played, haven't been forced to figure life out.
There is a huge aspect to exposure therapy. If as a kid, especially when, if you are forced to deal with uncomfortable situations and things that make you angry or make you weirded out, you learn to survive. Here's something that I will push back a little bit on. Gen Zers didn't raise themselves. Sure. Gen Xers and millennials, the older millennials were the generation that brought up Gen Z. And I think it was because they had really no idea what to do with technology and global connectivity in that way. So, if you think about like on a phone, if someone is talking bad about me, or if I see a post I don't like, what do? I just keep scrolling, right? The accountability and the way that you guys were sort of forced to build those coping mechanisms is gone. And I think that the parents of Gen Z individuals didn't really understand the symptoms of that, because there was no way to understand the symptoms of that. It's kind of like, it's like vaping, right? It's like, we're not going to see how it destroys people until 10 years from now, right? When we have all this data. So I think you're so right. I think that there's value in the learning process in that, but there's also consequences, which sucks. It's funny you said you did some research. I did some research of my own.
All right, lay it on me.
This was initially I looked into it for a youth lesson about anxiety and mental health and things. If you look at statistics and figures, the mental health degradation and more numerically the suicide rate, in America is much higher in the margins of Gen X and baby boomers, particularly men, like fathers in households, in Gen X and baby boomer households. And the trend with that is that it was kind of the culture, right, where men were taught the far extreme of the forcing coping mechanisms type exposure therapy, where you just had to be a man and figure it out. there was such a lack of mental health awareness in the older generations that men and women struggled with depression and anxiety and mental health for years in silence and just learned to live life numb, or eventually didn't know how to navigate their own brain and just wanted to end it.
Or just turned into sarcastic jerks.
Yeah, or turned into old men screaming at teenagers to get off their lawn, right? I don't think that old man is happy. I'm pretty sure he's not like, yeah, I feel satisfied in myself. Like, there's no way. Like, you know what I mean?
We would be much happier if you'd get off our lawns.
Right? Yeah, much. So just stay off. I think one of the beautiful things about Generation Z is we have the data and we have the learning from you guys where we are starting to figure out how to define anxiety, how to define issues that arise springing from insecurity with self-worth, right? We are starting to define and figure out procedures and patterns in those things so that we can avoid. And I mean, the depression rate is going up because of the technological side of things. But because of that and because of the data from you guys, like, depression is going up and the way we deal with it is staying exactly where it is. Like, the way the science and mental studies that we've done to combat that are also increasing with it, which I think is valuable. And I think our kids and our kids' kids and our kids' kids are going to struggle with the same sorts of things, but they are going to learn from us because we're the generation that is starting to, again, it kind of goes back to that question tradition thing. It's like we're the generation that is starting to look at, wait, why is it that because I'm a man, I have to just suck it up and do this thing or whatever? Or why is it that as a woman, I have to ascribe to these Western American wife roles? You know what I mean? It's stuff like that. We're figuring it out.
Yeah, I can see that opportunity, and I think those that are really trying are figuring it out. But I also see there's a whole lot of your generation that's just using it as an excuse.
Yeah. Oh, victim mentality is it's a rough thing to deal with. Yeah, I agree.
I don't know how many times I've had people, well, you don't understand. She suffers from anxiety, so that's why she doesn't have to be an adult. That's why she doesn't have to grow up. That's why he doesn't have to show up at work on time. That's why he doesn't have to, that's why he should be treated special because he suffers from anxiety. Well, everybody suffered from anxiety. Grow up. Deal with it. Again, that's the Gen X in me talking where, yeah, I think it's great that we're more aware of mental health. But at the same time, if you're just using that as an excuse and that victim mentality just to, oh, well, that's the reason why I don't have to do this. Or that's the reason why I never have to get better at this. And I think that's how we end up with the statistic I read the other day. 50% of Gen Zers have taken a parent with them to a job interview. I mean, that is absolutely asinine crazy to me.
It's pretty wild. Yeah.
That is absolutely nuts to me. That I can't stand on my own. I'm 25 years old. I can't stand on my own 2 feet. I need mom or dad to come with me to a job interview. I'm just thinking as an employer, no. As soon as you brought mommy in, just turn around and walk out. Because I'm not hiring both of you. I'm not going to pay mommy to do your job. But say, well, he suffers from anxiety. That's why I'm here. No, you're here because you never taught him how to cope with life. If it's being used as an excuse, it's the thing holding you back. Yeah, awareness is great, but awareness isn't just, oh, this is why I am the way I am. Okay, that's fine. You can identify why you are the way you are, but it should lead to helping you identify how to fix or how to deal with, instead of it just turning into, well, I'll just never amount to anything else other than this because I'm not willing to overcome these challenges. And yeah, maybe the way that my generation overcame those challenges may not have been super healthy. It's like the playgrounds, your mom sent me something the other day. It was a video clip of a Gen Xer talking to the younger generation saying, yeah, we learned how to cope because we played on hot. Our slides were not plastic.
Yeah,
they were steel.
Hot enough to fry an egg.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. It's like, and when we slid down this burning flame, we didn't land in soft fake bark dust. We landed on concrete. We landed in gravel. We learned how to deal with things, and it's without learning those things, you just end up with people who don't know how to cope with life. And so, I agree with you that it's great that we learn more about mental health, but we can't use it as an excuse. We
No,
can't use it
absolutely not.
as the
And
justification.
that is, in a similar vein, that is going to be the thing that we can teach our kids based off our experience of the how do, like you said, if we want to, right? How do we teach our kids to learn coping mechanisms and deal with life in the new kind of society that we live in that's very different now? Part of the social anxiety and the general stress and mental unwell-being rising rate is not a property of lack of coping mechanisms, but it's also a lot in great part to do with stress, noise. The world is connected, and in order to have friends anymore and to hang out with people, you have to have a phone, you have to have social media, you have to be online, right? It's such a big thing that people push, and everything is more expensive. Housing markets and college and job opportunities are getting fewer and fewer. I mean, you can see trends and data where life, and I think you would agree with this, as the world gets more and more sinful and broken, life gets harder in every aspect.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, the world is definitely a different place than it used to be. I remember when your mom and I first got married, we went and rented our first apartment. It was a 2-bedroom apartment for $400, and there was plenty to choose from. I mean, we knew that if we didn't get in here, we'd go over here. And I know that, like, when your sister and brother-in-law, when they first got married, they were struggling to find a place. As a matter of fact, I don't think they would have gotten a place if we didn't know personally, have a personal relationship through our church, the property managers that got them in. And rent is so incredibly expensive. It's like, I don't know how young couples make it. It's a totally different world. And I think that's the key. I think we have to be willing to adapt, but it's the when we give up and just start blaming other people. Like you said, it's that victim mentality. When we give it into the victim mentality. Now, this is another difference between, I think, a Gen X and a Gen Z mindset is, as a Gen Xer, it didn't matter if I was the victim. I was the only one that was going to solve my problem. I didn't look to the government. I didn't look for a handout. I didn't have anybody giving me anything. If I was going to get anything, it was going to be because I went and got it, or I went and worked for it. I wasn't just going to sit back and be like, well, this is where we are because nobody will do this for us or
Right.
for me. I think it's that personal responsibility that if we can pass that on to the next generation.
I'm honestly so grateful for the way that you taught Lila and I, because I think that you and Mom were open-minded and considerate and thoughtful of the generation that we were growing up in, that you had the healthiest balance of allowing us to be a part of this new world that we're living in while also forcing us to deal to, skills.
Yeah.
Which is something that I greatly value in myself, and that's a product of the way that you guys made us talk to the lady, right? In a previous episode, we joked about that with Lila.
Yeah, yeah. Lila would never talk to the lady at the store. She wouldn't. She was too afraid to go and ask someone a question. She'd just be like, "No, no, I just don't need it. I don't need. It's like, no, you're gonna go talk to the lady. Well, can't you do it? Yes, I can. I absolutely can, but I'm not going to.
But you can't, and that's why we're here.
Right.
I'm going to read our scripture for today. It comes out of Psalm 78, verse 4-7. In verse 4, we will not hide these truths from our children. We will tell the next generation about the glorious deeds of the Lord, about his power and his mighty wonders. For he issued his laws to Jacob. He gave his instructions to Israel. He commanded our ancestors to teach them to their children, so the next generation might know them, even the children not yet born, and they in turn will teach their own children. So each generation should set its hope anew on God, not forgetting his glorious miracles and obeying his commands. It does not matter what generation you grow up in. It does not matter what kind of specific issues are going on. There will always be things that we won't know how to deal with or cope with. There will always be, in some cases, massive rifts between generations. And I think that exponential graph is only going to keep rising. I think there are going to be things that when I have kids, I'm going to have no idea what to deal with, and I'm going to screw them up somehow.
Yeah. Well, just like I can say, "Hey, I was there for the rise of cell phones," you're gonna be able to tell your kids, "Hey, I remember when there was a time when we didn't have these
Yeah.
implants."
Yeah, or fill
Or
in the
whatever.
sci-fi blank of whatever
Right,
we're gonna have.
right. When we didn't have surrogate alien or robotic bodies.
Yeah, or when we weren't enslaved to the Galactic Empire. Gosh, I remember that. No, but the central theme across even all of human history clearly is this idea that God is the truth, and his truths and his ways are self-evident, revealed to us by the Spirit and by the Scripture as to how we should live and how we should walk. Those things will always remain true. Like it says there, even those that are not yet born, we will continue to teach our own children.
It says in Hebrews that Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. There are timeless truths. It doesn't matter what generation you're from. It doesn't matter what you're dealing with in technology. And God is big enough that he gave us his revelation. He gave us his principles that transcend all the differences in generations. And so I'm excited to know that my kids are going to be teaching those principles to their kids using completely different tools and completely different methodologies than what we did. But it's still gonna mean just as much in their lives then as it did in mine when I was growing up.
Yeah.
Even though you guys like to tease, and call me a boomer, I am not a boomer. That was my parents. Even though my boomer parents did it their way, um, you know, leaving us by ourselves to fend for ourselves. I don't begrudge the way I was brought up. There was a couple times that I almost died, and maybe I
Yeah, you
maybe
did
I
some
shouldn't be here.
stupid stuff. I honestly kind of wish that I had stupid kid stories like that, and I was just too good, I guess. I don't know.
Well, yeah, I mean, when you're left to your own devices, you go out and try stuff, and
Yeah.
sometimes it's not a good thing to try.
Yeah, sometimes little Timmy doesn't come back home because he swung across the chasm on that vine, and the vine broke.
But hey, those of us that survived, boy, you don't want to mess with us.
Yeah, I believe that's called Darwinism, survival of the fittest. Very, very moral and very ethical.
Yeah.
I know that a lot of these are more philosophical topics, and we don't reach any conclusions really when we talk about these things. But I enjoy talking about these things, and I enjoy even if we help in some small part to sort of try to bridge the gap between our different kinds of mindsets and personalities. I think that's I'm okay with that. I'm happy with that.
Yeah. If nothing else, hey, if you're listening and you don't understand what your kid is talking about, just know that you're not alone.
Yep, you're not alone, and that will always be true for
And
the
yeah,
rest of humanity.
yep, for all time.
Yeah. Thanks, guys, for joining us on Sundays and Side Quest. It's been a pleasure. Thanks, Dad. We will see you next week when we talk about fun, I believe. If not, we can edit that out. But see you guys later. Thanks.
Boy, you are just a punk, aren't you?
Hey, dude,
a young punk.
You're literally already in the old man get off my lawn territory.
I know,
we're
man.
10 minutes into this.